Welcome back to JKLIVE. It's all about the remembrance of Kenya's third president, Kibaki, there, who died about a week ago at the age of 90. And here to tell us more about him, on my far right, is Dalmas Otieno, former Minister for Public Works, former MP for Rongo. He's now running for Governor of Migori, right in the middle. CS for Health, Mutahi Kagwe. He served under Kibaki as Minister for ICT. And right next to me here with his stethoscope, which doesn't leave his hands, Dr. Dan Gikonyo, founder, owner, Karen Hospital. By the way, Dr. Dan says he has a book. Here's one. You tell it. You tell us. You said you have a book that's about to be published.
Yeah, of course, Jeff. I was hoping that it would be out before our president deserts us, but it's going to come out in about maybe a month or two. Yeah.
What's the title?
You know, that's the difficult bit about the book. Actually, that what comes last. After you analyze the whole thing, then you have to decide what's going to be the title. Yeah. So I've had many titles coming and changing, and eventually maybe one of them is going to be. Yes.
Good for you.
Yeah.
Well done. Well done. Buenos Dias, good to see you. You were MP for Mukurweini when the former president was MP Othaya.
That would be correct.
He was your neighbor.
That is correct.
What was it like? What was it like with him?
Well, first and foremost, thank you, Jeff, for inviting us here. I served as Member of Parliament for Mukurweini in the year from the year 2002 to 2007, and the late president was then the Member of Parliament for their constituency. And we had a very interesting relationship because obviously, to me, he was, as I said, he was a father figure. You know, in the sense that, yes, he was the president, but he was also a lot older than us. In fact, he was my father's age mate. So when I served as Member of Parliament, because he was very busy in running the country, what would happen is that a lot of his people would come to me so that we can sort out one or two things. And when he called, for example, the councillors of the time, people like Councillor Proper, we would be with them at State House. Right. You know, so that if there is something that is cropping up in Othaya, they can quickly come to me. But he was very possessive of his MPship in Othaya. You did what he sent you to do, not go there and pretend that you are the MP for Othaya. Right. You know, that was made very clear. Wewe ufanye hiyo nimesema hiyo mfanye.
Na utafanya.
Lakini nothing more than what he, he has said. Yeah. He was still the Member of Parliament for Othaya.
Dalmas Otieno, so you served as Minister for Public Works under Kibaki.
Public Service.
Public Service.
Yes.
But you also went to Makerere.
Yes.
So he's your alma mater. In
a way, yes. But 15 years ahead of us.
Was he legendary then? I mean, he graduated with first-class honors. I mean, he was smart.
First-class honors in economics. I had an upper second honors in the same subject.
Yes. And then LSE?
Yes.
What was he like? What was he like to serve under?
It was nice for me as a professional to work with Kibaki, because Kibaki was all the time results-oriented, particularly as president in his relations with the ministers. He would always want to know what was the objective. What is the ministry going to achieve? How far have you gone towards the objective? So it was so strongly results-oriented, so strongly involved in performance. And that is why he assigned me the job of performance management in the public service. As an economist, his vision was that Kenya should be managed in such a way that we become globally competitive. And to be globally competitive, you must have an efficient public service to support the private sector that is in competition with the rest of the world. Right. And he didn't have to repeat that. Once you knew it, you are supposed to work towards it. And if you came with any other topics that do not relate to what he expects, he had nothing to discuss with you.
When I see if you didn't perform, was he hard on you if you didn't perform?
Yes, he was. I mean, as Dalmas is saying, his modus operandi
was essentially go get me results.
Yeah.
And you see, you have to understand, Jeff, that generally speaking, presidents are very busy people. You know, and I have served in, I've had the privilege of serving under late President Kibaki and now President Uhuru. And one of the things I learned at that time is that presidents don't like they don't like you taking problems to them. Because they are very busy people. And if you are taking problems to them, then what's your job? You know, so what they expect, what he expected, and even to this day, what our current president expects is you have got a problem, you are the minister in charge of that whole area, come with a solution. Then the alternatives that you provide are what is going to provide the solution to the problem. But, you know, if you belabor just thinking about the problem, and you go and tell the president, oh, you know, we have a problem. You know, chances are he doesn't have a problem, you have a problem. Yeah.
That one he wouldn't entertain.
No, he wouldn't. Yeah, because what are you telling him to do?
Where there were options,
yeah,
and you wanted his guidance
he would.
On which of the options, because every executive decision has consequences, particularly political consequences. Right. And if you are seeing two solutions, but with different political consequences, he would entertain that. That these are the options, optional solutions. He would then give you his preference. Let us go with this one.
I'll come to his style in a moment. That's a really, really incisive detail there. But Dr. Ari, you probably knew the late president more than anyone here in this room. You probably knew him personally more than any one of us.
I had the privilege, Jeff, of being with the president for 10 years. And quite often, almost on a daily basis, which gave me an insight. We bonded very well. And one thing I would like is maybe one day to give a speech, you know, like Mark Antony say, I have not come here to bury Caesar. Listen, yes. I have not come to bury Caesar. I have come to praise him. And in this case, I would like to be here to praise the man, not to bury him. Yeah. Because I have yet to see people with a passion for a country like he had. A man who spent his time 24 hours for 10 years thinking about this country. He had no other interests. He didn't play golf anymore. He just sat there and managed the country for 10 years, day and night. His biggest passion outside Kenya was the East African community as a regional bloc. And he had a passion for it. And as you know, he worked very hard to have Burundi and Rwanda join the commission.
Exactly.
The community. And I remember him saying that in one of the meetings in Arusha, that he hopes and wishes that we could have a common currency in his lifetime. It has not come to be, but I'm sure one time it's going to be. But he always saw this bloc as one country. Yeah. And he didn't, when he went visiting, he didn't persuade people to come back home. He's the first president I had telling people, Apana, hapa muko, make it your home. That was in South Africa. Stay here. This is your home. Build your economy here. Don't come back home. I don't have enough jobs for you. Right. You know, which is, that passion is something that he had for the region, not necessarily for the country. But as a man, he's a man of integrity. And a man who believed in no corruption. Yeah. So when I hear people talk about Agro leasing and mentioning his name, it pains my heart. Because I'm quite sure, I'm 100% sure, he had nothing to do with that. And after all, you know, he let some of his ministers go because he believed in a clean government, he believed in honesty and integrity. That I can vouch.
Mheshimiwa, you were talking about his leadership style a moment ago, and there were some who accused him of sitting on the fence. As a fence sitter, what would you say?
You know, when politicians talk of a colleague being a fence sitter, that is their own interpretation of the decision-making process that leader applies. If Kibaki did not see sense in what was being debated, And people wanted him to be classified either on side A or on side B. He didn't see any reason why there should be any of those sides. So they end up describing him as a fence-sitter. No, it is the quality of the decision that was Kibaki interested. And if he does not see an outcome of benefit to the Republic, he just ignores your debate. So that does not make him a fence-sitter. It is that the material on which you are debating or talking or gossiping about is not of any significance to him. It is not something that he should occupy his brains on. But if you bring an issue that is of real interest to the Republic, particularly in terms of the advancement of our political economy, Kibaki will give you an answer. He will not be a fence-sitter. But when, as politicians, we gossip about this and that, particularly when it is involving the names of other people, you don't expect Kibaki to go and talk about somebody's name, because he's interested in the quality out of that person towards the objectives of the Republic. But if you go talking of other social or little things about personalities, he will not get involved.
He would just ignore you.
Yes.
Yes, you're laughing.
I think it's a question of, I think he at least meant a framework where you don't have to say something about everything. You know, it is not necessary. You know, there are those who believe that as long as there's a topic being discussed out there, you must have an opinion. Actually, you don't. You don't have to have an opinion about everything. And I think that's where it was. And this whole issue of tolerance, you know, the fact that he was able to tolerate so many different opinions, you know, wewe sema vile unataka kusema, you know, ukifanya kelele mingi, then people would come and tell him, you know, Jeff Koinange is making a lot of noise. Yes, you can go ahead. And I think that tolerance, Jeff, is one of the requirements in leadership.
That's true.
You have to have, if you don't have it, you have to cultivate it. For him, he didn't have to cultivate it. He had it. He had a natural level of tolerance. It is not all of us who have got that natural level of, you know, of tolerance. You know, and it's a gift. It's something that he had, that aspect of humility, that aspect of tolerance. These are the ingredients that eventually make leaders, real, famous, presidential level leaders.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And his style of leadership, I mean, they called him the gentleman as well. He was such a gentleman. Much more.
I don't know how to describe the word gentleman. To me, I call him an executive. Because in every situation, he was asking, what is the content of our discussion? What is the value of our discussion? What do we want to make out of what we are discussing? And if it is just debating in a controversy, then he is not part of that. So he wanted us to be able to address critical issues that would make a difference in the development of our political economy.
Absolutely. Dr. Ari, 20 years ago, maybe people forget, but Kibaki was sworn in on a wheelchair.
Yes.
Remember?
Yep. You know, Jeff, I've known Kibaki before he became president in many different categories. But, I started being of service to him even before he became president. Let me be honest with you. This is a man whom I would have paid to serve. You know, there you call me to come and see you.
Yes.
And I must tell you a joke. You know, one time it was late at night, and I had to go and bring other things. And to go and bring this medication. You can come in the morning. It's too much. No, Mr. President, I will go and come back. And it's not too much for me. In fact, I made a joke to him. You see, you're one of the few people whom I would come and treat. And then I ask you for an invoice. For having treated you, please, how much should I pay you? It was that, but he was such a nice man to be of service.
Yeah.
Very humble.
But let's come back to him in a wheelchair, being the president and commander-in-chief.
It was
after an accident that almost ended his life, right?
And you know, that day of swearing in was not as tough for him as the day he came back from London. Because we came back and from the airport, and we brought him through Eastlands on a raised platform. And you don't know why he put him on that area, because his leg was down here. He couldn't stand. So someone had stood there holding that leg, and then he had to sit up and look at the people. And then it took hours to get to Uhuru Park. And it was a very hot and sunny day. But luckily we came, and there were a lot of people. And I could see a man who is in pain, because he had a fractured leg, fractured arm, he had a brace on his neck, and yet he didn't lose it. There was no self-pity. He soldiered on like a strong man.
Yeah. You can see the pictures right there, yeah.
And he came to Uhuru Park from the airport and delivered a speech. So on the day of the swearing in, that was easier, because most of the acute injuries had healed, but he was on a wheelchair, and we had to wheel the chair up the dais. And he was I would say he was a very stoic man, very stoic. He could bear any amount of pain without flinching. And even the way we transported him to London with those injuries on a stretcher, he never complained. And he would sit there and ask us, what shall we do? And you know, Kibaki never talked about I or me. When he spoke, he always talked about we. You know, the royal we, you know. Wow. Yes, and he would make you feel that you're part of the team. And even when he knew the answer, he would tell you, Jeff, sasa, where do you najua hii mambo? Tuambie. Then you'd fumble and he knows the answer. Yeah. But you'd get out whatever information you have in a very easy way. Yeah. Where unajua? Tuambie tu. Then you go on. But on that day, as I say, he was in a lot of discomfort. Just like the day when he went to vote in Nyeri. Again, with a cast. And we had to drive all the way to Nyeri to vote. I had to make note, do you think we should go? Hey, it's too long. I said, no, if you don't go, you know, these guys might not turn out to vote. But when they see you there, and we had to vote in a car, but he is a man who, when he was determined to do something, he would do it. And by the way, he never had any yesterday. As Dalma says, if you want to not be with him, start talking about jana. Te jana unajua? Apana. Tomorrow. Yesterday is finished completely. Yeah. And Kibaki never talked about yesterday.
You agree with that?
Yeah, he never did. And he didn't want to discuss anybody either. You know, if you went backbiting somebody, he'd suddenly lose interest and start talking about something else. And in the middle of you're talking about Dr. Gekonyo, you'd say, lakini ile kazi tumemaliza. Just in the middle of it. I think to me is that you know, there are ingredients. Someone was asking us, as we were sharing earlier, how do people become presidents? You know, what is that? Yeah. And I think there is a combination of many things. You know, Professor Aosa used to teach us strategy, and he said there is one thing that you can never take away from somebody. It's called luck. Right? Luck is part of the things that we all do. You know, there's no reason why you do what you do. There is some luck that you did.
It takes preparation.
Maybe
to arrive at the luck.
You know, Dalmas, I've always believed that what is called luck is probably God's blessings.
Yes.
You know that God blesses you, and God is the one who has selected you to be in that position. Obviously, it takes many things. It takes that humility. It takes tolerance. It takes that leadership quality that somebody has. Sometimes also around you, the stars align, you know, so that, you know, for example, in the case of the Honorable Mwai Kibaki, you know, you are sitting in Uhuru Park, and the Honorable Raila Odinga decides to say, Kibaki Tosha, you know, and that now, you know, is a historical, happening that creates the momentum, and history is changed, you know, just there and then, and that is God's work. You know, I'm no priest.
I think, Jeff...
but that's God's work.
I think, Jeff, like we should mention that Kibaki really valued public participation. The participation of as many people as possible. Because he believed that it is ideas that will take us forward. and every individual has some idea of relevance to what the country is looking at present. So that way, he wanted, if you had an opportunity to be with him, he wanted you at least to give out something, you know, indicate something regarding the matter in discussion. So he believed in looking at, hearing the views of other people, and then is able then to collectively see the right direction, the right conclusion out of what A, B, C, D, E have said as regards this issue. So if a decision has to be made without that kind of participation, you will find him waiting. It's like he has a sense that something is still missing. We should get it.
Yes.
Yes.
What was he like debating with him in Parliament? Was he a good debater?
Kibaki would not come for arguments, because some of the arguments are arguments for their sake. He wants to listen to the relevant points that would lead to a decision that would be helpful in the solutions we are looking for as a country.
And as MP for Mukurweini, what was it like? You called him a father figure.
Indeed.
Did you feel he was a mentor as well?
Totally, totally, 100%. And I think that he was not just a mentor for me. He was a mentor, I think, for our complete generation of politicians. Because if you look at the behavior that we exhibit, even as current politicians, particularly the ones who served under Kibaki at one time or another, you see there is an attempt
to be like him.
There is an attempt, you know, to be calmer than you probably otherwise be. Because we learned that being calm and taking things in stride, and particularly patriotism and working for the country. You know, when you wake up in the morning, you can decide that you are a businessman, and therefore you go and do business. But if you decide that you are going to be in public service, then his example is clear. As you said, as Dan is saying, 24/7, focus, nothing else. You know, 24/7 is just go, go, go. And even if you look at the current president, who is also mentored, you know, in the process by the same thing. The same thing, 24/7. Nothing else. It's about Kenya, 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 Kenya. And I think that, you know, that is, and when you think about Kenya, you could think about Kenya in many ways. You could think about how to exploit Kenya. You know, that's also thinking about Kenya. Yeah. But in essence, what we are talking about is building Kenya, focusing on how we can make the people's lives better. And for him, every time there was an argument where there would be an opportunity for Kenya, and losing that opportunity, he would always look at it. I remember, you know, one of the arguments in a setting where we were talking about land being leased to outsiders to grow crops and so on. And somebody would say, no, we can't give our land to these people. The other one would say, oh, the law says this. So he turns around and says, wewe unataka kufanya nini na hiyo shamba? Wewe unajua, wewe unataka nini kufanya nini na hiyo shamba? And there was one minister who was saying, we should lease this land. Wewe hujui, huyu anajua, si afanye. So it's logical. You know, it's logical.
I love the way you imitate him.
You know, that way, yeah. that one is going to work. Yeah. You know, that's going to benefit Kenya. You know, so this idea that things start by an argument of why it cannot happen, he didn't like that. Start with the argument about why things can happen. Yeah. Yeah.
Dr. Dan, you were saying, there's someone who was saying the other day, he's the last of a generation of leadership in this country. Is that true? He's almost the last of a whole generation of true leadership.
You know, that there's an element of truth in that, because, you know, the time people like the President Kibaki went to Parliament, one, it was not, Parliament was not a milk cow. In fact, if you look at what they used to be paid in the 60s, when he became a member of Parliament, it was very little. And people who went to Parliament those days were people who wanted to lead and give service to the people, not to enrich themselves. And if these gentlemen would know better, if you see what members of parliament earned in the 60s compared to now, it's a new world. So these days, there could be, unfortunately, some desire to go to parliament so that you can become much wealthier. In those days, people who went to parliament were people who wanted to serve the people. You didn't even have to be a very wealthy person to go to parliament. And maybe sometimes you just remove those salaries and let people who want to serve without pay go there. But I think that I don't quite agree with that. I don't quite agree that, you know, there is ever a time when one type of a leader is the end of, you know, is the end of one type of leader. Every generation will always produce, you know, its own example of true leadership, you know, and there will be opportunities for generations to come, you know, to become perfect. And but you see also, Jeff, don't forget that we have a tendency to really worship somebody because he's not there anymore. That's true.
You know, but while they are there, we go on the rampage criticizing what they do. And it is not new because, you know, there is a saying in our own community that you never knew a cow had milk until the cow is not there. Then when you can't milk a cow, you know, maybe the cow had only one little cup, but at least you could take tea, you know. But once the cow is not there, then you really say, oh my goodness, you know, that cow was brilliant. I think President Kibaki was brilliant, but I think there's a lot of us who did not quite appreciate, you know, what he really was, you know, at the time that he was serving. And I think this is a characteristic that is going to continue with us. We criticize people in office, but once when they are not in office, and you see what they have done, then you will begin to appreciate and say, my goodness, that was a good president.
You know, it's funny you said that saying. My mother was reminding me of that saying just today.
About the cow.
About the cow. You never appreciate the cow.
Until you don't have it.
Until you don't have it.
Yes. When we look at our country, the state where we are now, of course, during our time with Kibaki, we were thinking of Nairobi as the center of a region. And not only talking of Rwanda, Burundi coming to the community, but looking towards Sudan, Ethiopia, and planning in such a way that we would be the center of this region. That was based on a vision that we should be in command of a region that would be globally competitive. And Kibaki valued performance standards that the other countries would feel they stand to benefit from being associated with Kenya, whether it is physical facilities, human capital, support that you'd get, financial investments, and so on. He believed that could have been possible. Jeff, what I think we are missing, there should have been a Kibakism as a direction that becomes a movement, and a number of people who are keen on the development of our country to global performance standards would kind of follow to achieve particular results. And Africa needs this, to say the truth. As it is now, one generation comes, presidential leadership comes, leaves, nothing is passed over to the next. Somebody comes, creative enough, it ends after a short while, particularly now that we put only 10 years. That is not going to do justice for Kenya. There must be a framework within which all of us work towards propelling our country to be globally competitive in a number of activities.
Yeah. Kibakism, I like that. Good phrase, good phrase. I think he would be proud that DRC has joined the EAC as well. Huh?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Goodness, can you imagine?
I think just to take off from what Dalmas is saying, I think one of the things I picked from you is the concept of continuity. The aspect of continuity. If you look at countries that have done well globally, whether it is Singapore, then especially the newly developed nations, newly industrialized nations, the South Koreas of this world, there is a huge aspect of continuity, so that you never stop. you never stop adding. When you look at, and again, Nairobi City, when you look at Nairobi City, from the planning that was there about building a railway, when we were in the 2005 cabinet, the planning and thinking about a railway from Mombasa started at that time. You know, so and it continued because the people who continued, the people who are in the government, in that government, continued in the next one, and therefore continued to implement things that that they were planning, even as they served in the Kibaki administration. So once you stop something, and this is what happens even in the constituencies, a member of parliament comes in, there is no continuity to the next one. In fact, there is no even handover. You know, hand over documents for the next one. So that missing link means that you start going back all over again. By the time you come to grasp what has happened in the previous administration, it is 3 years, and now you start preparing for elections. So that continuity aspect, you know, the aspect that, you know, Singapore has continued and continued and continued, Japan, the same thing, the continuity aspect is something that Kenyans must embrace.
Absolutely. Yeah. Dr. Dan, would he be proud of where Kenya has been right now?
Well, I think he would be, because Kibaki is a person who saw some good in everybody. In everybody. You know, when after 2002, and the Honorable Kraito has said this in the past, everybody was against the previous government. Something must be done. And I remember asking him one question. I mean, what about the previous president? And he told me, no. Amefanya mambo mazuri. And I couldn't see. I said, but Mr. President, what really has he done? Hapana, amejenga shule moja hapo, na ingine hapo, na ingine hapo. And he's a man who saw something good in everybody. But what I value him most is because we built Karen Hospital at his time. And what you may not know, Jeff, is that we had tried to do this 10 years before, and we could not succeed. And when Kibaki became president, one of the things he said was that government exists to serve the people. People don't exist to serve the government. Because sometimes the government may put so many hurdles in business, and I'm sure many business people feel this. Government may put so many hurdles in you establishing a business that becomes impossible. One of the things he did that enabled us, or me as an individual, and my wife and my family to build Karen Hospital, was that most of the bureaucracy of doing business was removed. All these steps that you had to go through this, and that's why I value Uhuru's government and the Huduma centers, where you can have something done quickly. But sometimes there are so many taxes, so many this, so many hurdles, and Kibaki was able to remove many of those to make business much easier. And many of the businesses at his time thrived and grew. Equity Bank, many other businesses also grew at the same time. East African Cables and many other groups that grew that time. And because there was freedom to do business without government interference. And that's one thing that he did that made the economy grow very quickly. And these gentlemen know better than me on those issues.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes. Gentlemen, I want to take a quick break, come back. And when I come back, I remember when I first saw the late president. I think I was at a birthday party because his son, David, and I were in the same class. So, you know, birthday parties, you're young, you're like 10 years old. I want to know when you all first met the late President White. When was that? Let's talk about that. Dr. Dan Gikoyo's in the house. He probably knows the late president more than anybody in this room. C.S. Mutahi Kagwe for health now, but he was Minister for ICT. We have to talk a little about ICT and how advanced Kenya has been. Huh? It was under, yeah. And of course, former MP Forongo, he's running for Governor of Migori. Damas Otieno also joining in to talk about the late President Mwai Kibaki. Join in the conversation, tweeting at Koinange Jeff, at Citizen TV Kenya, the hashtag JKLIVE. JKLIVE takes a break. We'll be back in a moment. Great conversation.